We begin this hour with the GOP's obsession over the past election, an obsession now threatening democracy. The former president is back on the road tonight, rallying in Perry, Georgia, a state he lost to President Biden fair and square, despite what he tells his supporters. And if sowing doubt in the democratic process is not enough, keep in mind all the recent revelations about how he worked to overturn the results. Speaking of his rally tonight, the Washington Post writes, this visit also marks Trump's return to a state where he is under investigation for possible crimes against nearly 5 million Georgia voters. That potential crime, calling Georgia's Secretary of State and demanding Brad Raffensperger, quote, find 780 votes. And this obsession spans well beyond Georgia. The final report of that bogus Arizona audit by cyber ninjas finding more votes for Joe Biden in Maricopa County than first reported. And while that should be embarrassing for the GOP and for Trump, they are ramping up fraudits elsewhere. Republican leaders in at least 4 states now pushing similar election reviews, even in Texas, where Trump beat Joe Biden. But it's only made possible if your state leaders allow it. Here's how Arizona's Secretary of State put it last hour.
I think it's important to remind folks that this entire exercise was enabled by elected leaders of the state of Arizona who are clearly running the state by conspiracy theory. And this kind of partisan activity, this partisan posturing is keeping us from dealing with real issues. Arizonans are simply tired of this.
I said it once, and I'll say it again. If you're watching what the GOP is doing and it doesn't make sense to you, good. That means you live in reality. Republicans, at least the ones supporting fraudits, do not. The New York Times reports, quote, in the hours-long presentation before the Arizona State Senate, the review officials did not focus on the numbers showing Mr. Biden's victory, but instead presented a blizzard of hypotheticals, none verified, most hinting darkly at a tainted election. The continuation of Trump's lies have real consequences to our democracy. A CNN poll shows nearly 8 in 10 GOP voters don't believe Joe Biden received enough votes to win the presidency. In fact, Biden earned over 7 million more votes than Trump. So why does GOP leadership embrace these damaging lies when they know better? Adam Serwer with The Atlantic frames it this way, writing, quote, at the core of these attempts is a dangerous ideology. The presumption that because Trump supporters represent, quote, real Americans, the will of Democratic majorities can be disregarded. This does not mean that the Republican Party is capable of winning majorities, but that winning them is irrelevant to whether or not the party's Trumpist faithful believe they are entitled to wield power. Adam Serwer joins us now, along with Matthew Dowd, founder of Country Over Party. Matthew served as chief strategist for the Bush-Cheney 2004 presidential campaign. It is good to see you both. Adam, I want to start with you. A New York Times op-ed takes a look at how GOP-led states are helping Donald Trump push the big lie. Republican state legislatures in states like Georgia and Arizona have, for example, used claims of fraud to seize control of key areas of election administration. Likewise, according to Reuters, 10 of the 15 declared Republican candidates for Secretary of State in 5 swing states, that is Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Nevada, have either declared the 2020 election stolen or demanded that authorities invalidate the results in their states. I mean, Adam, how do these extreme anti-democracy candidates within the Republican Party work side by side with Trump's push to reject election results? And how does it all loop back to your core argument that this is about them trying to delegitimize a growing and changing American electorate?
Well, look, I mean, the issue here is that, last time around, Trump's efforts to overturn the election were foiled by people in key positions who refused to go along with his attempts to invalidate or cast doubt on the results or use their office to do things that their office did not have the power to do. But these people being elected to these offices, what it means is that next time, if Trump attempts to pressure these people, they may not actually resist. And that's a real problem because what it amounts to is essentially an attempt to overturn the will of the American people. And the reason why they think this is justified is because they believe their voters are more legitimate than those of the Democratic Party. And therefore, it's OK for them to simply disregard what the verdict of the actual voters and just say, well, we're the only ones who are entitled to govern.
Let me ask you, Adam, and we've also seen the Trump base embrace his attacks on democracy. Is the real danger here not just Trump's actions, but the tens of millions of Americans that approve of his attempted coup?
Well, that's really the issue, right? Is you can say, the issue is Trump, but the problem is that he has so much political support still that it puts pressure on Republican officials to go along with what he's doing. If he did not have that political support, if Republican voters disregarded Trump or refused to listen to his lies, then Republicans wouldn't feel the kind of pressure that they feel to go along with this. And ultimately, that's a much bigger political problem. It's not something that can be solved, simply by, shooing Trump away, or, if he were prosecuted or something like that. It's a much bigger political problem that doesn't have any easy solution.
And Matthew, we are all old enough to remember when Republicans were trying to do autopsies and figure out what it would take for them to appeal to a new American majority. Why is that effort seem to have been put aside in favor of the big lie?
Well, there was always an element in the Republican Party that didn't want to expand and didn't want to enlarge the tent that has existed. There was always some smaller element of the party, but that smaller element is now taken over the party. And they threw that out the window in 2016. And they basically said, we don't care about basically any non-white voters in this. In some ways, they said, we don't really care about women suburban voters in this. And they were able to cobble together a small coalition in various states in order to win the Electoral College in 2016. They almost did it again, though they lost by a larger popular vote. But I think Adam is totally correct in this. It is a Republican Party today that does not like the changing diversity and the multiculturalism of America. It is out of step with who they are, which is a throwback to a time that's long gone. And so what do? They pass very punitive policies, and this is in Texas. I'm sitting in Texas, and we're front and center in what the Republicans are doing here. And then what they want to do is pass these punitive, unpopular policies, and then through putting impediments in elections, not being held accountable in this. And that's their game plan, because as you know, the census numbers for the last 10 years, we grew by 23 million people in this country, 4 million in Texas. We grew by 4 million in Texas. Nearly every single part of that growth was non-white. So they've seen the writing on the wall, and their only answer to that writing on the wall is to basically break down democracy. They no longer believe in the pillars of democracy, which the main pillar is voting, and they want to do everything possible so they keep an electorate that matches them but doesn't match the country.